Hello everyone, welcome to This Is Why We Stand. My name is Joe Archino and I was inspired to make this series so that the true meaning of the American flag could be communicated and so that people understand why that flag should always be honored and never disrespected. But today we're here to talk about a soldier named Alvin York. Sergeant Alvin York was one of the brave, probably the most well-known soldier from World War I. And obviously in World War I, the United States didn't get involved until the very end of the conflict. They were only in the war for about a year and a half, but by being in it, they greatly helped accelerate the end of the war. And really, until that point, the war had really bogged down in the muds of the Western Front, and it had really been just a war of attrition where each side, the numbers of casualties were just picking up, and it was obviously, everyone remembers from history class, the trench warfare. I mean, and it really was trench warfare. As horrible gets, it was just a war of attrition, both sides continually making attacks, making little progress, pushing each other back. And the U.S. finally, by being in the war, it wasn't the mere fact that the U.S. was able to just dominate on the battlefield. It was merely that the threat of the United States meant that the U.S. could just continue to add more and more soldiers into the Allied war effort. And Germany had sustained so many losses from so many years of the war that they just wouldn't be able to continue to pump out troops to fight the U.S. if the U.S. was this committed to the war effort. But obviously, history had a different tune, and the U.S., with the help of the Allies who had been in the war since 1914, were able to bring the war to a swift end. But Alvin York is one of those guys where really he became the face of the war when he returned to the United States, but his story is one that needs to be shared because it really is one of the most remarkable tales of bravery that you will ever hear. And I'm going to start it here. On May of 1918, York was in France with the 82nd Division of the U.S. Army. On October 8th of 1918, York and 17 other Americans had captured a German regiment. Quickly after that, they came under heavy machine gun fire. 9 of the 17 Americans were killed or wounded, and York was able to reposition himself and picked off the German gunners with his rifle. Right after that, 6 German soldiers with bayonets charged at him. York had no rifle ammunition left, so he pulled out his pistol and killed all 6 of the attackers. The remaining Germans were then forced to surrender to York, and on the way back to the American lines, York and his men captured even more of the enemy. I think ultimately, and this is documented, that York and his men were able to capture 132 enemy soldiers, and York was responsible for about 20 German soldiers' deaths that he was able to take down. But I think, again, the amazing thing to me is I think sometimes when you read this out loud, which I also write up a little transcript of this, so you can certainly follow that and read through it as well, search his name and read more about it from what I give you. But I think when you read these things, it almost feels like when it happened, it was an eternity. But certainly these are such fast instances. I mean, obviously from the time that York and his men captured the Germans to the time that the German machine guns opened fire on them. Then right after that, York was able to reposition himself, take out the machine guns. Right after that happened, 6 Germans charge at him, bayonets flung in the air. He pulls out his sidearm, takes out all 6 of them. Then right after that, on the way back to base, they capture 132 Germans in total. I mean, it's just things that are incredible testaments of bravery. But when I think you look at York and what he was able to do, obviously, I think it goes without saying that he won the Medal of Honor and several other citations for his actions on that day. But I think sometimes one of the things that people kind of look at in these instances is how can we really know? How can we verify that these things happen? Because they are hard to believe to an extent that an event like this could happen where York could just have gotten so lucky like that. And maybe luck's not the right word, but certainly there needs to be something special on your side to be able to get through a tumultuous situation like that. Like all the people on this series, I think courage is the biggest word that gets you through something like this, because when you're facing situations like this, you have to be brave. The bravest are the ones who are able to get through these situations. And I think, obviously, to me, one of the interesting things that I found about this was people wanted to go back and test this and just make sure that all of these things really happen. And it's amazing when you hear the ballistics research that they went through to verify the bullets that were fired in the positions that they were. And I can tell you for full fact that the ballistics report, they fully researched this years after it happened, and it very well, this is as true a story as it comes. Alvin York is as true as they come, and he was a remarkable figure who was able to take home the Medal of Honor. And I think, to me, the really interesting thing about this is the connections that we can make to Desmond Doss. And for people obviously missed season 1 of This Is Why We Stand, we talked about Desmond Doss, who was a conscientious objector in World War II. He refused to pick up a weapon, to hold a weapon, or to take another life because of his strong religious principles. There was a movie made about him recently called Hacksaw Ridge, which I think a lot of people have seen, and that episode with Desmond Doss did very well, I think, because people have seen the movie and wanted to know more about him. But at the start of the war, when the U.S. was obviously trying to fulfill its manpower to send over to Europe, he was labeled himself as a conscientious objector and didn't want to go because of his religious principles, but he did end up going, and he did end up... So his story is a little bit different from Desmond Doss. It could have started in a similar way, but back in World War I, the rules and regulations were much different than they were in World War II. And even though he checked off as a conscientious objector, that still didn't evade him from being sent over in an infantry unit, and he did end up fighting. And obviously, he was able to save many American lives and served as a big ultimate testament of bravery because of what he was able to do. But one of the things that I think says everything about who he was and what he believed in was that he tried to re-enlist in the infantry during World War II. Now, obviously, a lot of time passed between World War I and World War II, and he aged a lot. He obviously had a lot of medical implications, so he couldn't physically or medically be cleared to fight in World War II. But I think the mere fact that he wanted to fight in World War II after the horrors he had seen in World War I says everything about his sense of duty that he believed in. And after he came back from World War I, he really was a celebrity when he came back to the States. There was a movie made about him. Everyone wanted to be able to touch this guy. He was really the ultimate example of American courage and bravery from the war. But the spotlight wasn't what mattered to him. What mattered to him was service, and really he dedicated the rest of his life to service. He believed in education, he believed in public works, and he did so many things to help out his community and where he lived in the surrounding areas back then. But his memory really is a constant reminder that life isn't about fame. It's instead about defining and fulfilling our service to each other. And I highly recommend that you go and you look up the story of Alvin York. I've given it to you as quickly as I can with the time that I have, but Alvin York, Medal of Honor winner, the ultimate example of American bravery, the most infamous soldier of America in World War I. But thank you for listening to This Is Why We Stand, everyone. Joe Archino here, and I'll be back with the series very soon.